Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Topher Drives, where this morning I just so happen to have one of the most gargantuan and unnecessary vehicles on today's new car market, but that is why I love it so much. I think this is one of the coolest cars on sale right now, and that is, of course, the 2024 GMC Hummer SUV. We all saw the truck variant of this truck come out a couple of years ago, but more recently, this SUV version has graced the market, and I think it's even cooler. It kind of harkens back to the '04 Rich OG Hummer H2, and as you all know, it's the 20th anniversary of that era of '04 Rich, and I'm a big fan of that, and that means I'm a big fan of this. I've never driven an old school Hummer H2. I hope to do so someday, and if it's anything like this, I'm sure I will like it quite a bit. So this is the 3X trim, which means it's one up from the 2X, which I think is kind of funny that they kind of put it like that. It's like a t-shirt, 2X or 3X. What would you like? Your only choices are very large. But what the 3X means is that you get 3 electric motors as opposed to 2 electric motors in the lower trim. And speaking of '04 Rich, there's a good one right there in back of shot. Getting distracted. So this has 3 electric motors, combined power output 830 horsepower and 1,200 pound-feet of torque. The 3X also gives you what GMC calls watts to freedom, which is the launch control on this thing, propulsing it, is that a word? I don't know, to 60 in 3.5 seconds. This is a 9,000-pound SUV, and it absolutely moves. We also have a 4-corner air suspension in this thing, which means when you get on it, it feels a bit like it's going to do a backflip. I've never driven anything that squats as much as this Hummer EV. I think the only thing I can think of that gets close is the AMG G63. This is on a whole other level. So this morning I've got to do some bring a trailer photography. We are headed to Livonia to Vintique Motors, and well, these are my wheels for this morning. So we're going to see what it's like to commute this thing in a real world setting. If you own this as your only car, which if that's your thing, that's your thing. And honestly, I could see this one being a bit more practical than the truck because it is 9 inches shorter, which means you can actually fit this thing in your garage. The only real problem is the girth. This thing is really wide. It's even wider than a Ford Bronco Raptor, so it's quite the sizable unit. So let's take a look around this real quick, and surprise, surprise, I am running slightly late, so we're gonna make the walk around quick and then we'll jump in and we will hit the road. The back of this opens, well, like any Hummer should. You kind of hold your key fob to make this open sesame. And then you can see what has to be the highest load surface I have seen, I think, ever. You definitely have to have some upper body strength if you want to lift some heavy items into the back of this Hummer, but you do have a pretty good amount of room, and it is wide. You can use the key fob to shut the back, or you can hit this button right below the driver's side taillight, and that will power close your rear hatch. Obviously, we have a large spare tire back here on a 305/55 R22. That's consistent, of course, with the rest of the wheels and tires on this 3X trim. These are the wheels that come standard. The 2X gets slightly different wheels, but the main thing here is the triple motor and the ability to do watts to freedom. Otherwise, interior trim and things like that are no different. So I kind of like that the only real thing that you're paying for in this trim is more power. Let's take a look at the front. Of course, with this being electric, we have a bunch of room up here as well to put things. Similar to the Ford F-150 Lightning, it is pretty cavernous, and it did not like that I did that with the button, so why don't we use the key fob? Maybe it'll like that better. There we go. It's kind of like a little baby K-Truck truck bed up front, so you've got room for more stuff. And obviously the load surface is just as high as it is in the back, but you know, you may as well take advantage of the sheer size of this unit. And well, I like that you have multiple places to put things in this truck. Obviously the Hummer brand was kind of brought back by GMC without them having to recreate the brand that once was, which I think still exists but is now Indian or Chinese or something. But this is technically a GMC and the model is Hummer, but it still looks the part. I mean, the design language of this thing is unapologetically Hummer, and something cool that they've added actually are removable roof panels, which we're not going to be using today for obvious reasons, the weather, and also I don't imagine that people are removing these for their daily highway commutes, but all 4 of these panels come off. It's like double T-tops, and then you've got this roll bar here in the middle, a bit of strengthening there. The back bit doesn't come off, but it is cool to think that this is in some way a big 9,000 pound, 1,200 pound foot torque convertible, which is a little bit silly. Let's take a look in the back seat, and then we're going to jump on the road and get going with it. Inside we have this black leather and kind of like scratchy wetsuit material, black and white. And well, it fits the Supernova exterior paint, complements it pretty well. I want to say they call this black and lunar inside. All of the colors and trims and everything are kind of space and planet themed. And they even make a color for this, an orange color called Afterburner, which I suppose kind of fits into the theme as well. You can hear that rain on the roof, some nice ASMR for you. In the back seat, it's very cavernous, I suppose is kind of the best word for this. Very wide, but you do still have enough headroom, and man, this thing's got to be epic with these roof panels off. I haven't done it yet. I guess I'll do it on a day where it's not raining. You've got some cup holders here. You have your own climate control panel. You've got vents. You've got a USB-A and C port. Seat back pockets. Oh, we have a Monroney in here. Let's talk about price. Total vehicle price, $107,610. It starts just under $105,000. Our only options on here, Supernova Metallic and a front license plate bracket. The funny thing is they build these in Detroit, but the destination fee is $2,300. But they have to be consistent for everywhere. So if you live in California or something, you know, $3,000 to ship this 9,000 pound unit to you. 53 mpg E combined. Annual fuel cost, $1,450. What's so great to me and what's so funny about this is obviously back in the day in 2004 and when these cars were on their first wave right before the recession of '08, the big thing about them was they were so incredibly inefficient. They got like 8 miles per gallon, and they were simply a status symbol to tell everyone on the road that you were better than them. And it's kind of the same story now in the new era, because this is still an EV. It has a massive battery, but it is horribly inefficient. And I really, really like that about it. It kind of carries on the tradition of the OG Hummer H1 and H2. And speaking of that, let's talk about range. Well, Hummer claims just over 300 miles. I want to say like 314 or something like that. And that does seem to be pretty accurate. We've got just over a 90% charge today in this thing, and the cluster is showing just under 300 miles of range. So that should be pretty accurate. Our charge port is here on the driver's quarter panel, and this obviously has level 3 DC fast charging, and it will go from 10 to 80% in just over 20 minutes. So pretty consistent with everything else on the market, and honestly impressive that it charges even that fast because the battery is so massive. Let's jump in, let's hit the road, and let's do our commute in the Hummer SUV 3X. Up front, hard plastic on the seats, a little bit strange, but honestly I haven't really noticed that like you do in other vehicles that have hard plastic, like the F-150 Platinum. Grab handles to get you into this thing for the driver. That is important if you are a little bit of a shorter person. Really fun animations on both of our screens there. Let's fire it up. Every Hummer SUV comes standard with Super Cruise, so that will help on today's commute. We have wireless Apple CarPlay, which does not take up the whole screen, but at least you have it in this because a lot of GM vehicles are kind of going away from CarPlay. So I was excited to see this. We have a Bose sound system. We'll test that once we are on the highway. Otherwise, it's very blocky, very big, and honestly, decently comfortable up here in the cabin. These big gold vents stick off the side of the dash, and overall vent placement isn't that great. We'll talk about that a bit more once we're on the road too, but everything is big, blocky, kind of what you'd expect for the interior of a Hummer. A good amount of storage space, big center console, a ton of storage in here. I've got some breakfast items in there, excuse me. and some appropriate Hummer-sized water bottles here in the cup holders to show our practicality there. Wireless charger, a couple of USB ports, and well, that is just about it. Why don't we hit the road? We'll do a bit of a spirited section. We got to try out a Watts to Freedom before we hit the highway, and then we'll go on the highway and we'll talk about what this thing is like to live with. We have a pretty normal floor shifter here in this, which is nice for maneuvering this big thing. We have rear wheel steering on this, which helps a lot for maneuvering as well. And a cool thing you can do with this rear wheel steering is what GMC calls crab walk. So you hold this little icon here on the left side of your mode selector. You get a very dramatic sort of interstellar style mode little launch there, and you can see now we are in crab walk mode, which means I can turn this wheel and and you crab walk. Oh my goodness, I love silly little party tricks like this. Okay, let's turn this off before I need to actually get onto the road. So you can toggle your rear wheel steering into auto, and you can actually turn your rear wheel steering off as well. I'll just leave it in auto. You get about 10 degrees of rear wheel steering in day-to-day use, so that is nice. Helps for off-roading and things of that nature, and just helps maneuver this thing. I'm sure you guys have noticed by now as well, we have 3 windshield wipers because the Hummer Way is the very kind of short and flat windscreen, and with the width of this vehicle, 2 windshield wipers simply would not have cut it, so we have 3. Something else extra that I absolutely love. Pretty decent amount of physical switches here, which kind of trick you because they are still in the screen, but you don't use the screen to toggle anything on. We have this row of physical buttons to do everything there. You set off in pure silence, which I gotta say is a bit strange for an Hummer, but it's the new era. This is the way things are now. Watch how this lifts off the ground. Oh my. It feels like it's going to engage a backflip. There's a bit of heft to this steering, which I think is okay, because with this being a big 9,000-pound rolling brick that has rear wheel steering, you don't want to have willy-nilly steering. You want to have control of this thing. And to be honest, when you've got your foot down, when all 1,200 pound-feet of torque are being applied to the wheels, you don't get much sensation that you have control of where the truck is going anyways. So this is actually a rare case where I prefer to have heavy steering in a vehicle to give myself some sense of control in this thing. Let's make a pass on Iron Mountain here. Okay, here we go. Oh. It's so quick. Oh my God, it's so quick. But with that front end lift, it feels. Maybe that's why everything is space themed, because they expect some of these to just become one with outer space. We're going to take this corner pretty slow. 9,000 pounds. There we go. And exit. Okay. A lot of torque steer. A lot of torque steer. We're going to pull off over here. We're going to do a Watts to Freedom, and then we'll jump on the highway. Jump the gun a bit and say, NVH in this thing, it's pretty dang quiet in here, minus all the roof panels rattling. I'm sure you guys have heard that the entire time we've been going. So obviously there's some interior rattles. This is a GM vehicle at the end of the day. But road noise, very minimal. And this is a terribly loud section of road that they just repaved. Really, really nice calibration on our one pedal drive system in this truck. And if you want to have some stronger regen, you have this paddle on the left side of the steering wheel. Take your foot off the accelerator, you can push this paddle and it will give you a more aggressive regen. I'll be honest, I actually have not done one of these yet, so you guys are coming with me on my inaugural Watts to Freedom run. It's a bit wet out, but I think the all-wheel drive, I think we'll be fine with this thing. To engage Watts to Freedom, come to a complete stop, tap your traction control off button twice. And then many of things happen. The seat vibrates. That's an interesting choice. You get this animation of the Hummer on a runway. We're going to drop our suspension down. This is intense. So definitely make sure you have some time to engage this because we're still waiting on this. Okay, Watts to Freedom is armed. You get that green display here. Now it's as simple as left foot on the brake, right foot on the accelerator, and then release brake. We're going to let this kind of traffic go by, and then we're going to let this thing rip. Floor it. Okay, here we go. Release brake. Oh, wow. Yes, machine. Oh man, I don't care that the roof rattles. I don't care that it's all over the place. This is an excellent piece of engineering. Wow. Okay, let's turn that back into our normal mode, which, not to mention the cool animations you get from the drive mode screen. Look at this turning circle. I mean, what? It's so quick. You do in some settings feel like you are just going to rip up pieces of tarmac and spit them out at the cars behind you because of the immense torque and the immense weight of this thing. Just think about the materials that must create the drivetrain and the axles, and they must have gone to the surface of the moon to gather such materials. And speed power. You guys can see that immense amount of torque steer. I mean, just ridiculous. Getting up to highway speeds here. Bit of wind noise. Obviously, consider the shape of the vehicle. But I'm genuinely impressed with how they've been able to mask a lot of that noise. Okay, a lot of body roll here. Not a lot of steering, but a ton of body roll. Obviously, getting up to highway speeds is no problem. Get merged in here, and we're just going to go right ahead and try Super Cruise out and see how that behaves here on the Hummer. So from what I remember, you click your cruise control button to activate that, and then you click this, Super Cruise unavailable. All right, sometimes it takes a sec. Since we just merged, it has to kind of figure out which highway we are on. There we go. Okay, so Super Cruise is, by a mile, one of the best driver assist systems available in any new car. And that's because it can make a lot of its own decisions. So what this will do is, instead of you having to prompt it to change lanes, it will do that for you. Once we get up to this Audi up here, okay, I think that may be an option that you have to toggle on to make it auto lane change. So we will prompt it to do a lane change here. In some ways that's nice because I found that when you leave it in its auto lane change setting, it will sometimes camp in the left lane, and I'm not a big fan of that. Things like this kind of make the $107,000 price tag a little bit easier to swallow. Obviously you're paying for that Hummer name, you're paying for the heft of this vehicle, but also having some good tech in here does help. The infotainment and everything works very smoothly. GM infotainment has been pretty good in years past. I've had no real issues with it. on that front. Materials in here are a bit questionable though, I'll be honest. There's a lot of scratchy plastics, especially on the dashboard and on the lower parts of the door panels. If I'm paying almost 110 grand for a vehicle, and if you get the special edition of this, it's $140,000, I would expect to have some materials that are a bit nicer in here, and that even actually extends to the upper parts of the door panels. Let's segue into interior comfort here. It's a little bit of a bummer because the squishiness of the console and the door panel are pretty good. I've got a good amount of squish here, but unfortunately this weird like wetsuit material that they've used on these panels makes it feel like you're setting your elbows in gravel. It is very uncomfortable, and I've just kind of been driving with my arms at my sides here instead of resting them and getting myself set up in a nice driving position. If they would simply just change the materials on this, that would be all that they would have to do. They don't need to change anything else. But as far as commuting goes, you can sit here in this seat, which is quite nice. You've got good adjustability here. We are actually jumping off the highway here because the highway that we normally take up there is shut. So we're gonna do some street driving in this. But as far as highway driving goes, pretty confidence inspiring. Obviously, the 9,000 pounds provides confidence for you just going down the highway, because anything that gets in your way is going to be history. And additionally, you know, it holds itself. You're not constantly having to adjust the wheel or anything, and Super Cruise helps with that as well. How much of a weight difference do you think there is from me to one of these dump trucks? I think they call this a convoy. I take back what I said about the highway being shut. It looks like we are just avoiding some sort of interruption. So we're actually going to jump back on the highway up here, and then once we do so, we'll do a bit of a sound system test on this Bose system. With this having a 4-corner air suspension, obviously the ride is fantastic. It's damped, super soft. One of the softest vehicles I've ever driven. The only slight bummer are these massive wheels. Now you can fix this by opting for the off-road package, which gets you an 18-inch wheel as opposed to a 22-inch wheel, and you are spared from a bit of that impact harshness that you get simply from these wheels and tires. I don't think this is at fault at all to the suspension. And the vent placement in this thing is very strange. You've got this big blocky gold vent on the left-hand side of the dashboard, which basically just freezes your left hand into oblivion, like you are on the surface of the moon. I guess maybe that's the theme they're going for. And then you have these two central mounted vents below the infotainment screen, which are so low that you can't point them at your face. So if you're someone that likes to have air on your face, then you're kind of out of luck here in the Hummer EV. That's just the way it is with the design of this dashboard in here. Oh no. We are up against the fastest car in the world to go up to our little merge here onto the highway. That is a Nissan Altima with a dealer plate. I don't think there's anything quicker than that. It just simply doesn't exist. So we're gonna try and make history here. Oh, losing traction, a lot of front end lift. That was about 40% throttle. Nothing against the throttle tuning in this either. There's just so much power that 40% throttle is still an insane amount of pep.
Feeling
middle of the road performance here from this Bose system, and I mean, pretty standard of what you get from Bose and GM products. Pretty decent power, and if you play songs that are a bit more bass heavy, it does sound quite nice. So what else? Well, I guess we can talk about efficiency for a second. So far on today's trip, 21.4 miles, we've been doing 1.4 miles per kilowatt hour. This figure is usually closer to 2.5 or 3 in other EVs. So as I said earlier, pretty horribly inefficient, but it's a Hummer. Come on, it's allowed to be inefficient. And while it's super cruising, you can take a drink of your Hummer-sized water bottle. This trailer looks a little bit large for that Acura MDX, which I believe is touching its own tires currently. Yeah, that doesn't look within within the towing limits of that SUV. Road work ahead? Yeah, I sure hope it does. No, really, I do hope it does. I'm 17 minutes late now. No. Why is this happening? I just want to get to my destination. This is always the ultimate test for these cars, because if I'm frustrated as far as driving goes, but the car isn't adding to my anger, that's always a good thing. And I think that's the case here with the Hummer. It's not adding any additional stress, even with the heft of this thing. It's well poised enough on the highway. Yeah, we're all good here. So let's go ahead and wrap this up in our final 5 minutes of the commute. Well, this Hummer is just about exactly what I expected. It's huge, it's fast, it's cool to look at, and it's very expensive. But what I like about it is they've still been able to make this thing usable. This doesn't feel as ridiculous as it may seem on paper, and it does feel like you could genuinely daily drive this car and take many of people with you. So you could do the thing with this Hummer EV. The only thing I will say is a lot of the times you do feel like you are sailing this as opposed to driving it. Less so when you're on the highway, but kind of like when you're going around town with the immense amount of body roll and the incredible cavernous nature of this interior. It does feel like you're swimming in this truck as opposed to driving it, sailing, hoping for high winds in this to get you to where you need to go. But in this case, your high winds are 1,200 pound-feet of torque from 3 electric motors, and they get the job done nicely. So other than my elbows being a little bit uncomfy, I've had a pretty good morning commute in this Hummer EV. I just thought I would try one more elbow placement here on this Hummer to kind of drive it like an old school Lexus truck. Unfortunately, that material is carried up to the top of the door panel too. So pretty much no matter where you rest your elbow here, you know what? I've just thought of something. The solution to this would be wearing long sleeves. So for half of the year, if you live in a climate that supports, you will have comfy elbows. But unfortunately, during the summertime, it's gravel. Also, I will say, some of the interior rattles in here are a bit inexcusable for being $107,000. But no matter, because a Hummer is a Hummer. They've kept the Hummer philosophy alive. I love all 1,200 pound-feet of torque. I love all 22 inches of these wheels. I love all 3 of its windshield wipers. I love all 9,000 pounds of its heft. I love all 1.6 miles per kilowatt hour we've been getting on the way here. And I love that I've been able to experience what will go down in history as the icon of 24 Rich. And maybe someday these will be on buy here, pay here lots with wheels that are even larger and even more preposterous. So One can only hope, but for now we're enjoying this thing for what it is, and that is actually a pretty decent commuter, which sounds hilarious, but I've done today's commute in comfort, and hey, I've only used like 10% of my battery, so I could do that commute another 9 times, and we'd be fine. So let's get this thing backed into a spot here. Really nice cameras. Back it up, back it up. And it fits in the spot. Okay, cool. Once we're in park, we can put our electronic parking brake on, and this will lower our air suspension as well once you go into park. I do appreciate that this GM EV has a on-off button. The new Blazer EV does not. It's kind of like a Tesla where you just get in and go, but sometimes it's a little bit annoying and in some cases inconvenient. I just washed this yesterday and it is now completely ruined, so that's fun. Anyways, it was all worth it to show you guys this big gargantuan truck. I mean, look at these tow hooks. Oh man, I love this thing. All right, cool. Well, if you guys have any questions about the Hummer EV SUV, make sure you leave those in the comments. But that is going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.